Title of my sermon this morning is God's Unexpected Acts, drawn from our reading in Matthew and the verse that reads, "They need not go away, you give them something to eat." Do you still use maps when you're driving in the car and you're going to take a trip? Or have you switched over to an app on your phone? These days I use an app on my phone that plugs into via wire into the car and displays on my dashboard, a screen in the center. I don't remember exactly when I made that transition from the maps to the application. I think my wife may have a better memory of that than I do. She's probably yelling at me, "Don't look at your phone." And I shouldn't have been. But now I don't look at my phone. I have my screen up top there. At some point, though, the maps in my glove compartment became unnecessary. I hadn't anticipated the change. It was unexpected. A friend of mine recently moved with his wife into an assisted living facility. Sadly, his wife has Alzheimer's disease, and he could no longer take care of her at home. She moved to the memory care unit, and he moved into a small apartment in the facility. He soon discovered that he could only see her twice a week. And after a couple months, he moved back because he was lonely and couldn't see her any more than if he had traveled to the facility those 2 days a week. He hadn't expected their visits to be so limited and the loneliness he felt, so he moved home. There's one thing about the pandemic I hadn't expected. I figured people would hoard things. I thought it would be milk and eggs, the kind of stuff that people take before a big snowstorm. I even considered there might be a run on cash and some of the ATMs might be empty. Who would have thought it would be toilet paper that everyone would hoard? But lo and behold, the shelves were wiped clean of them. In this morning's reading, Jesus and the disciples hadn't expected what happened to them either. Right before our reading, Matthew told the account of John the Baptist's beheading to satisfy the whim of Herodias' daughter. When Jesus heard the tragic news, he withdrew by boat for a deserted place where he could mourn the death of his cousin and compatriot. But Jesus and the disciples hadn't anticipated the crowd. They could see them moving along the shore. A dust cloud rose up like a signal flare, indicating their movements. As more people joined, the crowd grew. The wind wasn't strong enough for them to escape. They hadn't expected the crowd's persistence. Jesus must have finally said, "Put the boat ashore." His mourning would have to wait. The timing was terrible. Jesus needed a break. The risks to him and his ministry were growing. We couldn't blame him if he felt unsure, confused, or even fearful at that time. He needed time to think and assess what he had been doing. The disciples were also tired. The growing crowds were a lot for them. Jesus' popularity made their work difficult. They wanted to help people, but they also wanted to protect Jesus. He could only do so much. When Jesus called them to follow him, they hadn't expected that the people would demand so much and that so many people would come to Jesus. Then Jesus and the disciples were caught off guard again. The thousands of people who followed along the shore needed so much help. They had been working all day and had forgotten what time it was. And when the sun began to draw near to the heights above the Sea of Galilee, they all realized no one had eaten. The crowds hadn't expected to be out all day either. When it passed the villages following Jesus' boat, people dropped everything and joined. After Jesus started healing, the mood became celebratory. People stayed praising God for miracle after miracle. No one wanted to leave. People would typically bring gifts to a healer, food and such, in appreciation of his work. But Jesus' unexpected arrival and into the rush to follow him all forgot about the customs of hospitality. No one brought food, which caught even Jesus off guard. Without hesitation, Jesus recognized what must be done. He gave thanks for what they had and broke the bread. He trusted God to provide. The miracle then ensued, and the people ate. The feeding of the 5,000 is mentioned in all the Gospels. It points backward to a time in the wilderness when the Israelites relied on God's miracle of fish and manna, the bread of heaven. And it points forward. The miracle of the bread foreshadowed the Last Supper when Jesus instituted the Eucharist. When God enters our life, we can feel like Jesus and the disciples and the crowd. The timing may be wrong. We may be tired and wanting to rest. We may feel unprepared, having other plans, or heading in a different direction. We may also feel unsure of what to do with the things before us. Such times force us to rely on God. We can't see our way forward, but God does. We don't understand what is happening, but God does. God is often in the unusual and breaks in patterns. God is where we are forced to rely on him, places where we feel unsure, confused, and even fearful. When we've tried everything and are forced to call out to him, we must recognize that in those times, God may have placed us there so we can find him and rely on him. Such are the places where miracles can occur. God can transform us by amazing us with new possibilities and outcomes. God can intercede on our behalf if we only call out to him. When God forced Jesus, the disciples, and the crowd into a different place and position, then Jesus' miracles happened. And what was the miracle? Jesus didn't change the world. He instead cared for people. He fed them. And then the world changed. When we find ourselves unsure, confused, and fearful, we can anticipate God being with us. God is in the unexpected. He is in the places where we least expect, because God acts unexpectedly to feed our souls and to save us.